Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Denton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey. The Moms I Know is your go-to source for motivation, inspiration, and resources, and real conversation about motherhood and parenting with intention. Thank you for being a part of our community. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
I want to live my life in such a way that it colors my things with memories, by Marie Kondo.
Hi, this is Maria, and I want to welcome you to the Moms I Know. Today we have Mia Keenan with us, and that quote just absolutely sets the stage for this conversation that we're going to have today. So I'm really excited to welcome Mia Keenan today. She is a mother, an educator, and a professional organizer. In 2019, she discovered the joy of Marie Kondo's tidying method in her own life, and soon after became a certified KonMari consultant. Mia launched Tidy Evolution on the island of Oahu and currently supports clients both in California and Oahu to establish sustainable organization that creates more time and space for their ideal lifestyle. And I need you right here in Bozeman, Montana. Mia. So I'm just really thrilled to have you here today with us to talk about this whole concept of not just organizing our homes, but really looking at how it relates to our entire lifestyle. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. And I want to thank you, Maria, for this wonderful opportunity to join you and have this conversation. I'm really, really excited. So
Great.
Big thank you again.
Organization is something that we have covered in very, I want to say, oblique ways over the years in our podcast. And we actually have talked with people who have different skills in terms of bringing things into more organization, but not so much an actual certified organizer. And so I'm really excited to have you with us to talk about this concept of why we would want to really look at this deeper idea of organizing our homes. I mean, like, yeah, I can look around my home and I can see all the things that I need to redo. And you know, for those of you who heard our last episode, we talked with Sarah Fletcher, certified feng shui practitioner. And so there's this whole idea of how we look at our home in a different way. And I actually did read The Magic Art of Tidying Up, Marie Kondo's, I think, first book, and resonated with it in a way that I didn't expect to, because I didn't think that I would be so drawn to her techniques. But what I found was they just were magical, literally. And so I'd love to have you share a little bit of your story of how you came to decide to go into this career.
Sure. So during my youth, during my childhood, my teenage years, we moved around a lot. So I had a lot of transitions in my childhood, which were at times stressful, at times challenging, at times amazing opportunities. And as an adult now, I've kind of reflected on the fact that I think I established a way of staying tidy, right? Or kind of staying controlled with my immediate possessions in my room or my kind of space as a way to kind of cope and have some structure around me. I think my personality is also kind of like an organized thinking personality, you know, so that kind of paired together. So throughout young adulthood and kind of throughout the years, I was always someone who really needed to have my space in order, especially if I was feeling stressed out. Like I needed to, you know, organize the things on the countertop and clean the countertop and just make sure that everything was in its place in order for me to return to like a reset for my own mental kind of stress level. I was always the person who kind of offered to help organize a closet, or, you know, just your friend or your family members, or kind of giving advice about that. However, my career was in education for the past, 20 some years in Santa Cruz County and Monterey County. So I've worked in those school districts in bilingual education, and specifically two-way immersion Spanish English, which is like a subset of bilingual education. So very, very specific. And, over time, I began to seek some different career opportunities for myself that could offer an outside of the classroom experience. And I transitioned through an interpreting role and some various things. And then kind of did some career exploration, which I wish that I had been offered more during high school, to be honest, in terms of just our personalities and our strengths and weaknesses and how those intersect with careers and making money in life. So that's kind of a whole, different conversation, but I
want to stop there for just a second though. I mean, that's a really key point that you make. Like, why don't we have that kind of awareness in high school or even in early college to help us? Because I know, so many of the women that we have worked with over the years, we're still trying to figure out what we want to do.
Exactly.
And all of these different iterations that we go through. So I love hearing this. This is fascinating.
And I think the public school system is including that more in their offerings. But, it definitely wasn't the case when I was, I'm in my mid 40s. So when I was in high school, that kind of wasn't a thing. And like you said, for people who are mothers or parents and spend a lot of their time parenting, whether they are working outside of the home or not, that often takes over. And either along the way or maybe after, once your kids are to a certain age or whatever, I think a lot of people do that self-reflection and think, is this still the career that is serving me? Or now I have to go back to, the workforce. And so all those things. Anyhow, so I kind of considered this idea of like coaching or life coaching or organizing. And I ended up having a friend who did the whole KonMari method because her friend was practicing, like her friend was becoming a consultant. And this was several years ago. And I didn't even know that there were consultants. Like I knew of the book and all of that, but I didn't know it was like a career. So I started chatting with her friend about it. And I just signed up on the website, like for the course to become certified. And I thought, if the next one is close by, I'll just do it. I'll just go. If it's offered in like London or New York, then I probably won't, just because, that might be a stretch in terms of whatever, my life that's going on. So it was offered in Los Angeles, and that was perfect. So I went, I did the course. It was really interesting. And I thought, I've never been a business owner before. I've always been employed. So I just figured I'd try it out. And I did end up launching my business during like lockdown, COVID, like shutdown. So that wasn't particularly great timing, but I work with clients and sometimes I do some virtual stuff. And I'm just still kind of in the process of figuring out like how big or how small of a role that particular, role kind of is in my greater life. All
right. Well, be careful what you wish for, because, it's amazing how we can put these things out into the universe and the universe unfolds. Yeah. But I love the name Tidy Evolution. I think that there is calling in.
I do too. I really, really love it. My dad actually helped me come up with this name, and he's really good. Like he writes poetry. So he's really into specific word choices. And it was just nice. Like we, did a lot of brainstorming and went through all the words and the combinations. And I just love it, because for me, it really is that. It's, this method is very appealing to people who are already interested in personal growth. And it doesn't mean that you have to be any level of like evolved,
can you tell us a little bit about, the method, and then this idea of, oh my gosh, organizing as personal growth? For some of our listeners, that might be like, wait a minute, I just want my closets to be organized. But I think, we're taking this much further. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And for our listeners that don't know that much about Marie Kondo, in a nutshell, kind of,
So, so Marie Kondo is originally from Japan. She grew up being like a very organized person and just kind of uniquely interested in that as a young child. She developed what she calls the KonMari Method, which has some specific guidelines to it. And so the differences I like to point out between more traditional organizing and the KonMari Method is, number one, we organize items by category. So instead of just walking into your kitchen and saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to organize like this corner, you know, or I'm going to organize that one bookshelf, even though I might have some bookcases throughout the rest of my house. We don't do that. We go by category, and it's holistic. It's efficient that way for your actual items, like your physical items, because you gather all items of one category at a time, and that way you can take stock and inventory of what you do have in your possessions. And so that's the practical, like logistical side of why it works, right? So we organize by category, it's more effective that way. And then there are some other logistical guidelines like folding and stacking things vertically. You know, so there are those nuts and bolts that set it apart from some other general professional organizing standards that you would maybe find through like someone who's trained through NAPO, or, you know, NAPO is the National Association for Professional Organizers, which is awesome and has like all sorts of resources. But so these are kind of the differences. So number one, by category.
And I can attest, her method works. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it logistically really does. So number one, you know, you're organizing by category. Number two, so the second thing that really sets it apart is that the yardstick, or the like litmus test, I guess you could call it, for whether you're keeping an item or not is what she calls sparking joy. So you're asking yourself, does this item spark joy for me? And in other, you know, systems or methods, there might be a different litmus test. It might be, someone might advise, if you've had this item for 6 months or longer and have never used it, then, you know, you don't need it anymore. Or if you've had this item for 2 years. So there might be different rules in different methods. So her rule, which is not a rule at all, she doesn't have rules. Her guideline is, does it spark joy for you? And this often, people get hung up on this. My clients get really confused by this, and understandably so. So I really break this down into a practical explanation, because the idea of sparking joy is kind of nebulous, right? It's like, what? Like, what does that even mean? Does it mean that I have to like the way every single thing in my home looks? And if I don't like the way it looks, do I have to get rid of it, right? Or does it mean that I smile every time I see, like what does it really mean? So I like to just break it down by sparking joy can apply to utilitarian items, as well as items that don't necessarily serve like a tool type of purpose in our life, but that we love, right? And there are different ways to look at it, and all of it is very personal. So what sparks joy for me is not necessarily what is going to spark joy for Maria, right? And so that's the beauty of it, is that through the process, each individual builds that muscle of identifying what sparks joy for themselves, not for anyone else, but just for themselves, right? And so that even leads into this level of like self-love and self-attention and self-care, because you're putting it back, you're giving yourself the authority to answer that question, versus the media or our family or our parents or, you know, all those other things.
Or a designer who, you know, may design something beautiful,
Exactly.
but if it doesn't resonate for you. And the spark joy is the piece for me. I mean, like her logical ways of folding things and this and that. I mean, that all resonated with me as a fairly organized person. But this idea of sparking joy is what allowed me to let go of amazing amounts of actual physical stuff, and to keep the things that I really loved. And that whole concept is what shifted for me. I would have loved to have had somebody working right alongside with me, but I kind of went through her books. I read The Magic Art of Tidying Up first, and then Spark Joy, and then went back and started doing the work. And we also had a big move. in the midst of all of this. So, getting rid of things as we were moving.
That was good
It's a
timing.
huge
Yes.
part of it. But I can see where having somebody really working with you can
Yes.
streamline it so very much.
Yeah. And so, the spark joy thing, sometimes you right away know if something sparks joy. And it might be because it's a sweater, you love the way it feels, you're never going to get rid of it, or someone gave you a gift that is sentimental, is important. But you might have doubts about other things, and those are usually utilitarian items. And you can think of it whether it serves a purpose and you need it. I mean, if you need something, that can still spark joy for you. Like it can be a spoon that sparks joy for you more than another spoon because one spoon is more comfortable to hold, or like a ladle to stir, or whatever. It can be a tool that sparks joy for you more than a different type of tool because it might be lighter to hold or more comfortable in your grip, or, so those are the things that, even though you might not love the color of your rain jacket, or you only use it twice a year because you don't live in a very rainy climate, that item, once you decide whether you're going to keep it or let it go, it could still spark joy for you and still be a keep, because you remember, even though I only use it a few times a year, I really appreciate it when I do use it, right? And because I'm walking in the rain anyways, I don't care what color it is, type of thing. So
I'm thinking of like, an artist or a craftsperson or a woodworker who, their tools are so important in the way they feel. And a lot of times, for those of us that don't have those specific talents, we look at our homes and we think, well, wait a minute, I don't have that. And so I love this idea of looking at things in terms of deepening our connection to them, and then where that can take us in our homes. And I think, in thinking about feng shui, we look at this whole concept of arranging the home to even help with relationships and with personal growth and all of that. And I think that one of the things that Marie Kondo says, and you'll probably get to this point, but this idea of tidy house, tidy mind, I'd love for you to go into that a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's a huge conversation as well, because, so first of all, the KonMari method can be compatible with all sorts of other ways to live in your home. For example, it's compatible with feng shui. It doesn't mean that you have to like follow one or the other. It's compatible. It can be compatible with, it can be compatible with any type of like color or design, palette you're trying to follow. A lot of clients have maybe a personal designer or like an interior designer that they work with, especially if they're moving into a new home and it's something like that. So it can be compatible with a multitude of other methods that you're applying to your lifestyle that you've already discovered or interested in pursuing or love. So that's great. And then the thing about, one thing you alluded to is what I call the ripple effect, which kind of goes back to the evolution and personal growth. But then, so I want to put a pin in that for a second, because then you talked about, what was the last thing you were talking about?
Just in terms of tidy house, tidy mind.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, thank you. So that is like a whole field of psychology and even evolutionary psychology. So many people, not all, but many people that I talk to share that they feel stressed or overwhelmed when they are in an environment with a lot of clutter, right? And like I say, there are people that may not feel that way. So it's not, I don't like to say an across the board, recommendation or situation, because people are very individual. Some people really thrive with their creativity when they have more things around them or a different type of environment. However, many people do feel stressed emotionally and mentally when they are amongst a lot of clutter. They might not have a place for their eyes to rest in the environment. And so your eyes might be just bouncing around with all of these items, and we call that visual clutter. And then, of course, you may not be able to find your items. So you're feeling frustrated because your daily tasks can't be carried out if you're not finding your physical possessions that you need. So all of that contributes to our stress. And there have been plenty of psychological studies that allude to that, right? And then there's also this theory in evolutionary psychology, which says that when humans started evolving from being nomadic people to more agriculture and sedentary people, we have developed an interest and a need for having a home, right? So we went from like being nomads to returning to one location every night to sleep or to rest or to eat. And the need to have a place to fulfill those bodily functions is called homeostasis. And so as humans, we need to, that homeostasis is basically just like keeping ourselves in equilibrium, right? Like keeping everything that we need to stay alive in balance. And so the theory is that part of homeostasis is, since we have become more sedentary than nomadic, is having an environment that we can be in, whether that's, you know, our home or even if you live in a tent year round or whatever, it's wherever your environment is. And so having that be a predictable, orderly, nourishing, welcoming, and comfortable environment supports our homeostasis, supports our mental stress level. So that's kind of the evolutionary psychology part of it. I'm not an evolutionary psychologist. That's just what I've gleaned from reading.
But I love this because this is really like, you know, why we're talking about this. This isn't just, you know, a frivolous, oh, how to organize your home. This is like helping, you know, I would imagine every parent who's listening is saying, I mean, I don't know too many people who really thrive in clutter. They may say they like to have this kind, but in terms of that, and also as a family, you know, we're talking to families.
Definitely,
it doesn't
definitely
work for the whole group. And so how do we find this way? And you even talked about that, like when we can't find things, how frustrating that can be, and our stress level goes up. Or if one person in the family is tripping over somebody else's stuff. And so, you know, all of these things play into this idea of a healthy, dynamic, thriving family lifestyle.
Definitely.
Where, and you know, I always talk about, there was a song when my kids were little about, if you put it back where you found it, then I'll find it when I look for it. And trying to help children really know there's a place for everything, and that we take care of our things. We respect our belongings, that we are, you know, if we have taken the time and care to possess these things. And so this whole idea of how we evolved from, you know, nomad to stationary is fascinating, and that our bodies are always looking for this homeostasis. But nowadays we see that our stress levels, our anxiety levels are so high. It's interesting that you did start this in the midst of this pandemic, when everybody sort of went, you know, home, and they were all spending more time in our home. And so we're looking at that. And I think, you know, home projects have
skyrocketed.
Skyrocket. Yeah, all of this. And so, you know, this is actually perfect timing for us to be looking at our home as some place where the heart is, where we want to feel comfortable, where we want to have low stress, where we want to be in communication with the rest of our family members. So this is all just fascinating to me.
Yes, it is. And definitely for families, you know, so I have children myself. They're a bit older now. My son is 14 and my daughter is 20. So she's in college now. But, you know, I've been a parent for this long, and I've been a teacher, and I taught kindergarten for many, many years. And so that background really helps me work with families. I love working with families. I work with a whole family unit, and we tag team, and we do all of the KonMari categories for each individual. It takes a long time.
Oh, but how fun. So each adult and each child gets their own.
Yes. And I work individually with individual sessions with children as young as 5. And those sessions are tailored based on their attention span, right? So that's going to look differently based on their age, developmental level, and just the personality of the child. But I tailor that. And For families and children, the reasons I love the KonMari method are because it is very holistic, and we start off with a lifestyle vision that can either be for one person if you're working with an individual, or it can be in the form of a little mini family meeting for the family lifestyle vision. And all children can participate in that. They might only be drawing a little sketch of what their vision is, but they still participate. And then for parents who I work with, sometimes they just kind of want to do their process because they really just want to focus on that, which is great. And that's what Marie Kondo advises, is to one person in the family or the household. And this could even be a household of like housemates or roommates, it's just your home. For one person to go through the method and really kind of understand it for themselves, and then work with other people in the family on it. So I offer that, and some people want to start that way. Some families who are more busy, they want more of a tag team approach. And because I'm comfortable doing that, I offer that as well. So my services are very personalized based on what the individual needs, what the family needs. But I do always recommend sticking to the categories, so there's certain things that we stick to, and then there's certain things that we can personalize.
Right. Well, this is a very personal thing. To go through all of your belongings and to organize, to have somebody come into your home to work with you. This
Absolutely.
is a very, I would imagine that, that people have to have a great deal of trust in you as an individual and to feel comfortable to have their family work through this process, but how rewarding it must be.
Definitely. It is a very personal process. And that's the part that I love. I love just, you really are there to support the individual with what they need. And it's never the same. One person might have a lot of anxiety or feelings about their clothing and have zero attachment to books. And another person, for other reasons, might really not even care if they could just wear all black every day and it doesn't matter because it's just utilitarian to them, and then they might have other attachments or feelings about different things. And these attachments to our physical items, there's so much history behind it, right? And so there's like how you grew up, there's how your parents grew up, there's whether when you were a child you had a system for tidying or not. There's a huge variety, a huge spectrum there. There are mindsets that are involved: scarcity mindset, abundance mindset. There's trauma. There's just so much stuff. There are sentimental attachments to items, to possessions. And so I'm very careful with my disclaimers. I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a legal professional or mental health professional. I am trained in the method, and I am trained and available to listen, to give advice regarding how the client's overall lifestyle can intersect with their belongings, and to hold that space, and to always find resources if I do not include that service, right? So if
I just had this vision of like, you being a family counselor all of a sudden, there's a
right.
about
and
something,
you kind of
the trauma that comes up around, something that happened in childhood. And then also, when you get to the paperwork, the legal papers, what do you need to have and not have?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
So I recommend the basic guidelines in terms of taxes and all of those things, but then always, the client and I decide like, once a client really wasn't sure about her business taxes. So obviously she consulted with her tax attorney, or, I just make sure that, and that's part of the accountability too, because I'm also the person who is just reminding of what the steps are. And it's very linear. We make a list, and there might be some follow-up homework items that the client does in between sessions. And sometimes those are very easy tasks, but we just want to make sure they get followed up on before we progress, and these might be simple things like return that dress to your sister-in-law, or, ask so-and-so if they still want this book returned to them. If not, let's add it to the donation pile. So it's not hard homework. It's just, the KonMari consultant is also in that role of being the supportive accountability partner.
And it doesn't happen overnight. I know that when I went through the process, and, I could go through the process all over again, and I would love to, have support in this, but that it takes time, and you don't have to do it all at once. And that's the beauty of it. And you can continue. It's like that revolving. But so obviously Marie Kondo has been a huge mentor to you. You also, when you were talking about your childhood with the moving all of the time and, kind of how you came to this, as well as also your personal temperament, it's fascinating to see that here is where you've ended up. And yet in listening to you, I'm thinking, there's so many different people who could utilize the method, utilize your services, but I'd love to take it into this place of like a little bit more of this personal growth. So what happens to us as we go through this evolution, this tidy evolution?
Yeah. So a few things. One thing that I alluded to earlier is that when we learn how to identify joy, what sparks joy for us in our physical items, that spoon, that screwdriver, your clothing, it's like this muscle that we build. And because it does take a long time, and you're looking through all of the possessions in your home, or, if it's just your room, your environment, you're given a lot of practice. And you could call it boring practice. It's like, oh, which white t-shirt do I like better? The one with the pocket or the one without the pocket? So sometimes it is kind of boring and tedious, but you're building this muscle of identifying what works for you in your life with your physical possessions. Once you've identified what works with your physical possessions, you kind of are like, oh, I'm so good now at identifying what I like, what works for me, what feels comfortable for me, that it's very easy to expand that joy identification to the rest of our lives. And that's the ripple effect that happens, right? So many people who go through this process, instances with my clients or other consultants that I know or that you read about, individuals will have a ripple effect of doing the KonMari process and then reflecting on other areas in their life and making changes so that those other areas in their life are more joyous to them. And that might be in careers or relationship or, hobbies or a multitude of areas. So that is the ripple effect that happens. And then there's also this other piece, and this is a little specific to the KonMari method as well, because the KonMari method really respects the sentimental item, what is called the sentimental category. And for me, for example, that was something new in like staying orderly, in my world of staying orderly. And it really helped me because I've had so many transitions in my life. I've moved around a ton. I've kept things with me. I've lost things. I've been married. I've been divorced. I've had kids. I've lived in so many different homes. And so some of those transitions were still not resolved for me, or still really emotional. And in examining the items the sentimental items that belong to those, or that were linked to those transitions, that's where I kind of got more benefit, in terms of emotionally and kind of letting go of that stuff from the past.
Right, the emotional stuff as well as
exactly.
The physical.
And so that, and some people may have a lot of attachment in the form of sentimental items. And so that can offer a tool for them to work through it. Some people may not. But, some common examples are, family relics or photographs or sentimental gifts from grandparents, from parents, things that we're holding on to, or if a parent has passed and we are left dealing with all of their possessions, and it's too hard to embark upon because you see one thing and you start crying, or it creates an emotional response, or any of those things. And so with the KonMari method, we leave sentimental to the very end, and by the time we get to sentimental, we've had a lot of that practice about the sparking joy, and we've had a lot of practice and kind of built some self-confidence in ourselves, so that we know that we have experienced letting go of things and we're still okay. right? And it might have been, again, letting go of the boring white t-shirt or those items that weren't sentimental for us, but we've at least gained that confidence of like, oh my gosh, I was so worried about getting rid of stuff before because what if I wanted it, the following day, or what if I needed it the next week? And now I've practiced and I have let myself get rid of things and I'm still okay. And so by the time you get to sentimental, you're just better equipped, like emotionally, to kind of tackle that. And it really does take time. So that I was faced with a decision about my wedding dress. I had been divorced for several years. I still really like my wedding dress, but I had never worn it aside from the wedding date. I really loved my wedding event. And so the dress had a positive memory, even though the marriage didn't work in the end, the dress still had a positive memory. So I somehow wanted to preserve it, but I was like, I'm not going to wear it again. It was too small for my daughter because there were different sizes. It wasn't really so I went through all the options, right? There's like a donation organization where you can turn wedding dress into little angel dresses for like stillborn babies, which was amazing, but it wasn't the right fabric for that. So it's kind of basically you end up with time and space to really focus on your sentimental items, to look at all of the options of what to do with them, and to think about it and feel into what feels right for you. And so, for example, with the wedding dress, I ended up cutting the bodice off and throwing it in the dumpster. Like I literally walked outside and like threw the bodice in the dumpster.
Wow, talk about letting go.
I kept the bottom layers and I kept the satin to like reuse. I don't think I ever sewed anything with it, and I think I've gotten rid of it since. And then this tulle layer that I really liked, I used it to make an earring holder like frame thing for my daughter.
Yeah, so there you kept the sentimentality,
yes,
and yet you were able to let go.
Yeah. So we work a lot with sentimental, and if you're ready to let go of it, or if you are not ready and you keep it, then we work with, is there a way to display it in your daily life so that you can enjoy it? Or is there a way you can repurpose it into something useful or meaningful? Because also part of Marie's thing is a lot of sentimental items aren't useful to you or beneficial to you if they're just always in storage, right? Because the beauty of something that we really decide to keep that is sentimental is because we love it. It sparks a positive memory for us. And so we work on how to incorporate those physical items into your daily life.
So I can see how all of this is so applicable, and then as well as, this personal growth and family harmony and all of this. But I'm just thinking about, the mom who is just overwhelmed with kids,
absolutely.
with time management, with all of that. So I want to kind of bring this full circle as we wind down here. What would you say to that mom or dad who's saying, this sounds great, but I can't even,
absolutely,
I don't have time. I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Or
so
like, how could you encourage them to dive into this? Because, why is this going to make their life easier?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the complete KonMari method when you have young children is attainable, but it's hard work. And there are people that I've worked with, families who are totally into it. And they're like, yes, this is going to we're going to do one session per week for a year and we're going to get through it and we're going to do it. That's option A, right? Option B is just one parent in the household, usually the parent who is most stressed out physically or mentally about clutter. They commit to doing it just for themselves. And that means their clothing, their books. They'll have a little bit of a discussion about common items such as kitchen items, but then kind of direct the situation. And that is a lead by example option. So if you're can't invest in the time and effort for tag teaming the whole family all at once, just I would say one adult to do the method. And the lead by example situation does have a ripple effect throughout your household. Aside from that, either in conjunction with that or separate, you can just guide your children through parts of the method. And like, even if you have multiple children, you can guide them through their clothing. You know, one weekend could be for each child, or
so this can actually be activities that you're doing together, and the end result is hopefully that everybody is going to have reduced stress and anxiety around all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow process with children for sure. So, and these are examples of just if you're not working with a consultant, like if you're doing it, you know, on your own within your family. So I would either option A, one adult kind of do their own thing, do the method, but you know, let the kids see what they're doing. Oh, look, I learned this new way to fold and I like it because it fits more. Or, you know, hey, I have this exercise equipment. Do you want to help me decide like which band is the best for me? Like this one's cracked and doesn't really work anymore. And the kid will be like, oh yeah, like, you know, they'll choose which one is the best, obviously. So just, you know, including, and then there are the really practical tips that apply to all organizing for families. And my main one is create an entry station in your home. Think kindergarten classroom and make sure that you have an entry station for every single member's bags and shoes and masks and, you know, all of those things laid out.
Okay, right there, that one tip.
If you can't do anything else, spend one day creating an entry station.
Right. I'm thinking of, you know, my own house and my children and the grandchildren, and just that one thing right there is huge. And so all of this has been so helpful. And, you know, I feel as if this is just the tip of, it is just the tip of the iceberg.
It is.
You know, you can spend obviously hours, weeks, months doing this method, but
it's a lifestyle change. It really is. You know, and once you learn it and once you learn how it works for you, then it's like you dial in your home, and when things get a little bit messy, you know where to put them back. And so your reset is 10 minutes because you've established those homes, and you might move throughout your lifetime or things will change. But when you've learned the method, it's easier to do those transitions because you know.
And that's the key right there. It's a 10-minute reset once you've gone through this, instead of an overwhelming weekend or week or month. And so, so thank you. This has all been so fascinating. I'd love to make sure that we let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you, because you said you do virtual as well as the work in Hawaii and California, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So I currently am working in person in Santa Cruz County area, like Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay area. And my website is tidyevolution.com. My Instagram is @tidyevolution, and I have a page on Facebook as well. You can go to my website. I only do like a once a month newsletter type of thing, very minimal, but so that there's a spot to subscribe to that. And I offer free 30-minute phone consultations. So for anyone interested in virtual or in-person services, they can schedule a free consult on my website or submit a little form, and I will be in touch to chat with them about their interest and their needs. And yes, so virtual is very effective. However, it does work for people who can do the physical actions of moving items themselves. So but other than that, it's the same in terms of the coaching and the accountability and all of those things. And then I also seasonally offer tidy parties, which are super fun. It's like a virtual Zoom format, and I do a presentation on a category, and then I do little, you know, individual check-ins and create the action plan for each participant, and then we just kind of keep checking in, and then you tidy in your home during that time, and it's like super fun, super productive. So
that sounds great. I love everything that you're offering. So thank you so much. This has been a fascinating journey for me to hear not just your background, but sort of this whole idea of the personal growth, the self-discovery, and then the stress reduction. And I'm going to be implementing. We had done a really good job on our house in California. Now with the move to Montana, I have to say there's still some boxes that I need to address. So that's my true confession.
Well, it's a process. I mean, and there's no shame about it. That's the other thing I really love to put out there is like people, you know, there's no shame about having a clutter problem. Like I said, I
think we all do.
We all grow up differently. We all have different relationships to items. our possessions. And having a problem with clutter doesn't mean that you're inferior or lacking in the rest of your life, you know? And so I think there's starting to become some like more awareness about that, but people are nervous. They feel nervous and they feel embarrassed about their clutter. And so I put that out there that like, this is a no shame.
Well, we don't want to be judged about our stuff, but this is why we would also want to work with you, is to, you know, to get to this place where we're comfortable in our homes, we're comfortable welcoming people in.
It's a very supportive thing. Yeah, it's not a judgment thing.
Well,
for sure.
Thank you so much, Mia. This has been a lot of fun, and it's given me so much food for thought. So I'm going to be looking at my house in a whole different way this evening, I'm sure.
Awesome.
So anyhow, thank you very, very much for being with us.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate it, Maria.
Thanks for joining us today for The Moms I Know. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To get the show notes and resources mentioned in today's episode, visit themomsiknow.com. For information on Maria's programs, visit thefutureoffamily.com. And for information on Sheila's programs, visit purplebeetfamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us on iTunes, and follow us on Instagram at The Moms I Know Podcast. Until next time, have a joyful family journey.